When Russia launched its all-out assault on Ukraine, it upended millions of lives, forced everyday people to flee their homes or stay and fight, essentially ending life as Ukrainians knew it. The invasion also made the effort to reform the country's court system that much harder. The Ethics Council of the Judiciary of Ukraine was created last June in an effort to turn around a long history of corruption within the judicial system, including allegations of bribery, controlled by political bosses, and judges using their courts to carry out political orders. The council is tasked with approving candidates to be appointed to the country's High Council of Justice, which is charged with appointing, disciplining, and dismissing judges. It's made up of 3 Ukrainian and 3 international legal experts, and it was supposed to convene in Ukraine in February, but obviously the fighting forced them to make other plans. I'm joined now by one of the council's members, former Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Justice, Robert Cordy. Justice Cordy, it's good to see you.
Great to see you, Jim.
How bad was the corruption in the judiciary in Ukraine that merited this kind of action?
Well, I can't tell you in depth about the corruption, but I can tell you that it was a real factor. Public trust had reached the lowest of levels. Internationally, the EU and others recognized that it was a huge priority for the country. If the country wanted to, for example, be a candidate for the EU, they really needed to address corruption and some of the other qualities of the Ukrainian judiciary.
My understanding is not that, I mean, from what I've read about it, not only did it seem like a mob operation, my words, not yours, but there are a lot of reports that pro-Russian oligarchs attempted to undermine any attempt to fix the judiciary, obviously to undermine Ukraine's effort at statehood. That sounds about right, doesn't it?
It sure does. And we were, once the international members were appointed, there was a bit of a campaign to slander us. And that was really prompted, I think, by the same forces you're talking about.
So did Zelensky do this? President Zelensky appoint, I think it was last June, you and your colleagues were appointed. Was this because he legitimately cares about this? It was because it was a demand of the EU? What was the motivation in your estimation, Justice?
Well, I think a little bit of both. This is part of a larger reform movement that has been going on for the last 5 or 6 years, gaining momentum over the last couple of years, both addressed to the judiciary, which is critically important in all of this, and also to corruption more broadly in the business community. The establishment of the anti-corruption court in Ukraine, which occurred in the last 2 years, was a huge step in really creating a court to focus on corruption within the country. And that was an important step. And then this is an important step to try to create a more trusted judiciary from the highest levels down to the bottom.
I hope you don't take this the wrong way. Why'd they pick you?
I don't know. I was recommended by the State Department and I believe the World Bank as well. In part, I think because I have worked with judiciaries around the world for the last 21 years and have worked extensively in Asia, Eastern Europe, and elsewhere. Back when I was on the court, I hosted some delegations of Ukrainian judges who were in Boston to learn more about the American system. In 2015, I was invited to speak at a judicial and legal reform conference in Kyiv, sponsored by the Bar Association of Ukraine, on judicial independence, and then was invited back in 2016 to talk about transparency and the relationship between a free press and an independent judiciary, and got to know a lot more about the challenges. Trust me, the corruption challenges, the lack of independence, and the people struggling against that, because there really were struggles against that to try to change that.
Can you speak a little bit more precisely about what your mandate is? What are you charged with doing? Well,
the High Council of Justice really runs the judiciary in the Ukraine. As you mentioned, everything from the appointment of judges, the assignment of judges, disciplining, dismissal, setting the standards. It's 21 people, headed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And these are nominated by different entities within the country. 10 of the members are nominated by the Congress of Judges. Members are nominated by the President, by the legislature, by the Bar Association, by the Prosecutors Association. And this entity is critically important to both the running of it and the ethics of it. And so we were asked, or we were charged with, I should say, doing two things. First of all, conducting a one-time evaluation of all of the currently sitting members to determine whether they met the criteria of professional ethics and integrity, which I can talk about a little more. And then to interview candidates who have been recommended for appointment to the vacancies. There were 4 vacancies at the time. This was in November of last year. We had 36 applicants. So there were two things, both involved with really doing background investigations, deep background investigations into the professional ethics and integrity of these candidates. We had a bit of a surprise when we announced we were going to start doing the background investigations of the actual sitting members.
How'd they take that? How'd they like that?
12 of them resigned right away.
Wait, in anticipation of being...
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Well, guilty as charged. You might not say that, but I would.
12 resigned in February when we announced that we were about to commence doing the background investigations of the sitting members. That created a whole new dynamic, of course, because now you have a High Council of Justice that doesn't have a quorum, that cannot operate. And we got another 50 applicants from the Congress of Judges to fill those vacancies. So now we have like 86 or 90 applicants that we had to work with.
Are the courts functioning in Ukraine as we speak, or no?
Well, they're functioning as best they can. I mean, for example, there are 2,000 judicial vacancies in the Ukraine.
Out of how many seats?
Out of 7,000.
Wow.
So a lot of courts have, have one judge that should have 7 or 8 judges. So they're struggling. They're working hard, most of them, struggling and trying to come out of this, hopefully with more respect and more resources.
You know, when you say people have to pass an ethical test, just as a hypothetical, if one of these candidates, I don't know, had had a case around insurrection, an attempt to overthrow the government before him, and his wife had supported the insurrection, would that person be qualified ethically to sit on this council?
Well, the facts would, of course, depending on the facts, the fact that someone supports a particular cause, I don't think is sufficient. But if someone were involved in organizing the cause, that would certainly might create a conflict of interest that would require some form of disclosure and recusal.
You know, Justice Cordy, I don't know if it's your responsibility, but it seems to me, and I have no expertise in these areas, these kinds of changes, while to people in this country may make a ton of sense, are not just institutional changes, but require a cultural change, a change in mindset. I mean, we thought every part of the world wanted democracy, but some people weren't used to democracy and weren't so crazy about it. Do you worry about that kind of thing, or is that the president's mission? You're just worried about the institutional issues?
Well, we're worried about the institutional issues, but you're right about culture. Culture is extremely important. And I must say, I have been completely impressed with the quality of the people that I've been dealing with and the determination, not only of the legal community, but the staff that we have and the judges that we've been working with. There is a huge commitment here. And in spite of the war, I mean, this is something that's so important to them and they're working on. There are, obviously, you want people to respect and trust the judiciary. And to do that, you have to demonstrate that they are worthy of respect and trust. And this is part of our challenge.
And so even though you had to cancel a visit, I think it was in February or something, it was scheduled, the work goes on of your group? This continues?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Are you worried,
First of all,
are you worried about being used at all? I mean, considering the history around the judiciary in this country, you come pretty highly credentialed, as do your colleagues. I read about all of them. Do you worry at the end of the day that you get used by people in high places who really don't support what you're doing?
Not at all. I mean, there have been instances in my work overseas with different countries that being used is something you have to really think about. Here, not at all. Not at all. And I feel, well, this is such an important mission. We're all in it together. And it's been intense. I mean, we have a full-time staff. I have three assistants, young lawyers in Kyiv, marshaling the information. We have civil society, and particularly those organizations that have been involved in fighting corruption, totally supportive. They're providing tremendous information for us to use in our investigations. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau is providing us with reports. It's really a very impressive effort.
Before you go, there's a film later tonight that I've gotten to see already on Frontline about human rights violations, war crimes that are just immense in Ukraine. Will Ukraine's own courts address some of them, or will that be the province of international tribunals when this nightmare is over?
No, the Ukrainian courts will address some of them, and indeed have already begun to do so. Hopefully, they will not be the only ones that are addressing those horrible acts. And hopefully there will be an international tribunal of some sort. But the answer is yes, the Ukrainian judiciary is absolutely going to be involved in litigating and overseeing the litigation of those matters.
Justice Cordy, it's great to see you. I hope you'll keep us surprised, and I hope you come back, tell us about your progress.
Will do. Thanks, Jim.
Be well. Thanks so much.
Thanks.